indeed, we've heard, fantastic commentary and propositions and examples and things that will need to happen, to really improve the inclusion space and the participatory space. And indeed, I think it is really time we take the conversation to another level by speaking with some other people that I know you've been eager to see. I have today, we're supposed to be 3 of us on the panel, but I do think that we will be, discussing with 2 people. And again, because we are in a pandemic and people got sick, and so there's nothing we can do about that. We just need to make the most of what we can. So again, welcome to this panel. And I just want to say thank you for staying on with us. And Theo, is there any housekeeping before we get on, or we should just go ahead? Please, could you just let us know if we should just shoot, or we could just, is there any housekeeping we need to do?
Please go ahead, Edwin.
Okay, thank you so very much. So today, on the panel with me today, I'm going to be talking with 2 amazing people. The first is going to be the Minister of Digital Transition and Administration Reforms. Yes, Gita, please, sorry if I don't get this right, Gita Mezo. Dr. Gita Mezo is a Moroccan minister in charge of digital transition and administration reform. Prior to her appointment, she worked as an entrepreneur and as an academic on developing digital solutions that have a strong socioeconomic impact. She holds a PhD from the Carnegie Mellon University and a master's and bachelor's from the EPFL. Dr. Mezo received multiple international awards for her work. Please make welcome Dr. Mezo. Dr. Mezo, are you on? Thank you. Please, I know that we may not be able to clap, but we should try and indicate. These days, this digital thing has some things like thumbs up or something. You're very welcome, Madam Minister. And the other person on the panel is a known face, the face we can't even, I don't know how to begin to describe her, but Aya Shebi. Aya Shebi is a multi-award winning Pan-African feminist. Indeed, she rose to prominence as a voice for democracy and a shot to global fame as a political blogger during the 2010-2011 Tunisia's revolution. She has served as the first ever African Union Special Envoy on Youth and the youngest diplomat at the African Union Commission's chairperson's cabinet in 2018 to 2021. So please make welcome our firebrand activist, Aya Shebi.
Thank you, Edwin. So good to see you.
Please, you can. Yes. So this session really is talking about how do we really translate we should have been joined by Rebecca, but she's not well, like I said, and apologies from her. It was really unavoidable, but we also recognize that we're in a pandemic, all those kind of things can happen. But I want to start today, by basically just set the scene. So we've talked about the different approaches that have been, discussed on the first panel at a higher level, right? Let's come to reality. Let's come to making these things practical. Let's begin to discuss, how does inclusion really work? How does inclusion really work? And I will be speaking with Aya from the point of view of a youth, right? Who is really eager to shape things to ensure that young people get into the space. It's not just about seeking the space. And open government provides that platform. And so we want to talk, we're going to ask a few questions. But as we are developing these questions, other questions can come out. And then I'd like to really get your thoughts from questions and answers from those of us who are participating. By the way, I work for the One campaign. I'm sure I know I didn't introduce myself, but I work for the One campaign as the Africa Executive Director. And I used to lead the transparency and accountability work for the One campaign. And OGP, again, is one of my biggest passions. So please, just make me welcome too, so that it doesn't look like I did not welcome myself. So Aya, I'm going to start with you first. And the reason why it is important to get this question off the ground, indeed, 60% of Africa's population is estimated to be under 25. That figure has gone around, all over the place. And this number continues to grow every year. In fact, the evidence shows that this is the population that has been greatly affected the most by the pandemic through unemployment and poverty. Youth unemployment, poverty. Question I want to ask you. What do you think are the open government policy priorities that the government needs to focus on right now in order to turn the increase in youth population into an opportunity for transformation, especially for young girls. And the reason why the young girls will be emphasized is simply this: they are the worst hit, they are the worst affected, in this kind of situation. So what do you think are those key policy priorities that the government should focus on in order to really transform this emerging youthful population that is growing into real transformation on the continent? Your thoughts will be really welcome right now, Aya.
Thank you so much, Edwin. So good to see you. Madame la Ministre, bienvenue et c'est un plaisir de vous voir. And OGP family, it's so good to be here. Well, yes, African youth have been among the population that was the most affected by government response to the pandemic. So it's not as much as a health challenge for young people, as much as it's an economic challenge. So unemployment is rising, they're further marginalized, and so on. And when I talked to young people early in the outbreak last year, March and April, they would say that it's the same for me to die of COVID-19 or in the Mediterranean or of hunger, because I do not enjoy my basic human rights as a young person. So now the question on how we build a generation of young leaders and citizens engaged, especially young women, I think we need to first talk about, do they have the opportunity to lead? Because in Africa, we're still at a conversation where young people are out of leadership. If we are discussing how young people can transform leadership, we are still talking about how young people can lead. So we cannot really go into providing recommendation for governments on young people being in the space of leadership without really analyzing what we have in Africa. And it's uniquely African that we have this generation gap in leadership. 60% is the average age of African leadership, and 20 is the average age of the population. There is a gap, and this disparity is at the core of governance principle. So we can, if we talk about inclusion and representativity, this question is essential for us. But let's talk about solutions. I think we all know we're the youngest population in the world, we're demographic dividend, we have potential, we're a force, and so on. But I think if we think about policy, orientation and solutions, last year, actually during my mandate as youth envoy of the African Union, we encourage governments to get inspired by other governments, because the solution is here in Africa. We don't have to look for models of governance outside for inclusion. And they said to me, okay, give us some case studies that we can follow. So we published something called Greater Inclusion of African Youth in Public Service and Governance. And we put forward case studies for governments to adopt in their own government. I can mention 3 examples of them. One is the case of Namibia, where the president appointed the first presidential advisor on youth. And I'm here actually in Accra, where President of Ghana adopted our recommendation and appointed a special advisor on youth in February this year. And now we have about 5 or 6 special advisors at presidential level across the continent. There is a case of Rwanda. So they're building capacity of youth through government internships. We need youth to occupy government corridors in masses, just like we occupy the streets in masses. And we know the past decade, young people have been frustrated, and they went on the street to demand good governance and to demand transformation of governance. But if they're not in the system to understand governance and to influence governance, they're not all going to be employed by governments, but they have to understand how to navigate policy decision making. If they're employed by government, even better, they can digitalize, they can transform our traditional bureaucratic institutions. And the third case is Nigeria, lowering the age of youth in politics. Till today, many parliaments and many presidential positions have a ceiling of 40s. So how can young people really run for office if they're not even eligible? And also the removing the economic barriers to run for office, to be even a candidate for election. And Algeria tried a model of subsidizing the candidacy fees for young people running for elections. And even conversation now happening in Tunisia around election reform. We actually want to change the model of election for young people to run on equal footing and established political parties and be voted by their neighborhood, because a young person can win election within 10,000, 15,000 constituency without any campaign money. But if they compete against 100,000 constituency with established political parties, that would be really hard. So I think what I'm trying to say is that first, we have to recognize the generational and governance gap in Africa, and then we have to institutionalize what we call intergenerational co-leadership. That across generations, we have to lead together and we have policies that we can put in place, and not only because you need us for the legacy of these institutions, but because it works. It actually works. And there are many African countries who tried that, and we see greater inclusion of youth in governance.
Awesome, Aya, as ever. And indeed, I don't even know how to begin to describe the way you've so succinctly put out these principles and the case studies in different African countries, not outside of Africa, where these solutions that you're proposing are already taking place, and how we have already begun to see the transformation of the landscape in terms of youth inclusion in governance. And again, the open government principle is about inclusion, so that everybody's voice matters, and then there's the cooperation or co-creation between the governed and the governors, so that we can all create solutions that work for everybody. Thank you so much for those comments. I'll come back to you, but in the meantime, I just want to reach out to you, Dr. Mezo, please. COVID, the COVID-19 indeed has offered a stress test, for government institutions, for public administrative systems, for public services were found, and they were all found wanting, because we've seen that the inequality, the level of disparity between the haves and have-nots, is it about education? Is it about health? Those have become stark in our face. We could see those inequalities. I want to just ask you, with the level at which the poor and the marginalized have been affected, how can governments leverage digital governance to strengthen the public administration systems, so that we can at least reduce the inequality if we cannot eradicate them, and then of course so that we don't also exclude more people, and then protect those marginalized? How can we leverage this digital governance to do this? Would be great to get your thoughts, Dr. Mezo.
Yeah, so thank you, Edwin, and nice meeting you, Aya. So I would like first to thank the OGP for organizing this regional session. So as you mentioned, the effects of the pandemic, have been strong on everyone, but they were particularly strong on vulnerable populations, including women, children, elderly people, homeless, etc. So to counter these effects, the Kingdom of Morocco has taken many important measures. So guided by the vision of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, Megada system, Morocco has implemented an integrated plan to counter the spread of this pandemic. So the King initiated and created the special fund for the management of the coronavirus pandemic. Various actors, I'm talking about private sector, public sector, civil society, citizens, everybody contributed to this fund, which accounted for 3% of our GDP. It was a huge fund. And then we deliver, digital tools were critical to deliver this aids, because the mobile phone penetration in Morocco is huge. So we leverage this mobile phones to reach this affected people, which were mainly the workers in both the formal and informal sectors who lost their jobs or whose income were reduced. So digital tools were used to reach them and to deliver aids. So that was very important. Also, as at some time where the lockdown, everybody was home, the schools were closed, digital tools allowed us to continue delivering education to children. And there were a special arrangement talking about inequality. So for example, the lessons were on TV, because almost everybody on Morocco has TV, so we didn't only rely on the internet, and also in the internet. And then on the internet, there were a special arrangement. So when you access lessons on the internet, that was free of charge. You were not children were not charged for accessing online lessons. So that helped reduce inequality. At least people were not left behind. There were also, for the health ministry, they set up a strong digital communication campaign. And I know, so when we say, actually, it was not only digital, multiple mediums, but TV, radio, newspapers, internet, everything was there because there were strong public awareness campaigns about preventive measures and the importance of vaccination. And actually nowadays, Morocco, 62% of the entire population, not just the eligible population, are vaccinated. and that ranks Morocco among the best ones in the world. And that's actually thanks to this massive awareness campaigns that were run. And also the king set up an example by being vaccinated on TV, and that helped raise the awareness of this. There were other multiple examples, is that, I mean, actually, thanks to digital tools, people were able to work remotely, so digital services were able to continue. And people that are extremely vulnerable, like pregnant women and some people who have some diseases, they were allowed to work remotely for even longer periods of time. And actually, so the public services were able to continue even though people were home. And that was great, because for a couple of months, we were completely at home. Also, I mean, as everybody was home, violence against women increased because they were at home the whole time. So a lot of violence against women incidents. So digital tools, phones, everything was set up to kind of first raise awareness about the problem. And then there were tools where women could kind of report these incidents so that they were to speed up interventions. Also, again, online shopping kind of substantially increased during the pandemic, and that's people were able to get food, were able to get what they want without going without going out and meeting new people. So the online shopping helped us continue living, I wouldn't say normally, but continue at least having the kind of things we need without increasing our risk of contamination. It's very important. I mean, these are examples. It's very important to kind of say that in Morocco, there is a before and after the pandemic. After the pandemic, people realized substantially the importance of the digital tools. Before they were like, oh, digital, that's just, oh, you know, this little social media I do, it's fun. But during the pandemic, I don't want to say thanks to the pandemic, but because of the pandemic, people realized the importance of digital tools, what it can give them, that even though all the sectors stopped, digital things continued, but also helped society live and reach everybody and continue living. And some people think that digital tools can leave some people behind, but actually digital tools can help you reach people that are remote. It's easier to reach somebody digitally who are remote than have them come to the capital, etc. I wouldn't say that we fixed all the problems, that Morocco fixed all the problems, that nobody was left behind. I wouldn't say this, but we're working towards this goal, and digital tools can help towards this goal. I mean, so digital tools can help and will help, and we're working together with other multiple society actors, again, civil society, private sector, citizens, universities, to reach this goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this highlight. Again, I think you've highlighted from carrying on from the first panel, we had seen where Dr. Obi had mentioned that indeed the digital tools can be democratized such that the design and the way you reach people that are so-called, excluded can actually, like you said, the digital tools can actually help inclusion, and again, I know that sometime we met during the Mo Ibrahim Governance Weekend in Cote d'Ivoire, and in one of the sessions we had talked about the level of education, how almost 70%, of Africans are not able to really, and the kids who are supposed to be in school are not even able to read and write. And so how do you talk about digitization and inclusion for these kind of people who are in the rural areas? And I think what Dr. Mezou had just highlighted basically show that where there is a will and where there is by intention, we can actually design tools that can help us reach as much as we can. And indeed, it could be a time to leapfrog. I'm sure you've heard the leapfrog term, to say some of the things that we couldn't do during the traditional time. With a crisis like this, we're able to leapfrog, and digital tools and transformation can actually help, increase inclusion. So I want to come back to you on this, right? You've talked about the different ways we can get, young people, the need basically to get young people into the space, right? Now, the question is, indeed, what else do we need to do to really build a generation of young leaders, right? How do we really get a critical mass of young leaders that are really speaking the language of governance, that really are interested and are interested in serving the citizens, you know? So how do we move from concepts and ideologies to the actual reality and building a critical mass of young people who are moving along this line, who are looking forward to service as a key agenda, so that it is, you know, it is balanced. From where you sit, what do you think we should be doing in this case?
Thank you so much, Edwin. If I may, just to comment on the online, because I heard also on the previous panel talking about democratization and how the digital helped democratize, and then I come to the question of youth leadership. I think the case study of Morocco is a great example that the potential of the digital, but we are really behind as continent, and the digital divide is real. So as much as we say it democratized and we have more people in the room and more people here present who could otherwise not have access, where ministers are speaking and they could, you know, challenge them on the chat, at the same time, it's only 30% of us who are online. And I was trying to pull up statistics from ECA, actually, which says that 460 million of us in Africa have a phone, and only 120 million of us have a phone that actually has access to internet. Only 60 million of those have the internet, and only 45 million have a stable, regular internet at affordable price. This is how we end up from, you know, really having a smartphone, and they say everyone in Africa has a smartphone, to actually only 30% of us are online. 70% of Africa is offline. And that means, you know, when we say young people are the one to change the narrative of the continent, are the one to make, you know, Africa a global player on the continent. And we know that online plays a critical role. But if we imagine if Africa's population is 90% online, what kind of conversation shift about the vaccine and about, you know, decolonization and about all of the issues we talk about? It's because we're not online. And the few of us who are online are screaming and are making noise, but it's not reaching where we want to be. So I really want to emphasize that governments are really responsible to collaborate with all stakeholders, with public-private partnership, to crash internet crisis, to make sure we have internet and to make sure we have electricity. Because without power, there is no internet, there is no digitalization. And we're talking about 50% of Africa does not have electricity. And so as much as we want to praise the internet and the transformation of the digital space, we are behind as a continent. And then the second question on youth leadership and how we can make sure, first of all, we need to have role models, okay? To have youth in leadership who are serving, you know, a continent and not serving themselves. We cannot become products of the same system. And so far, we are still talking about institutions that are fragile, that are corrupt, that are, you know, have a lot of illness that needs to be transformed. So how are you going to bring a young person and put one young person as the head of whatever position and be like, okay, we gave you the space, and then that young person fails, and then we say, okay, young people can't deliver. We're setting that young person to failure because the whole system needs transformation. So we cannot talk about, you know, youth coming in and bringing new energy and transforming while the whole of society need to be engaged, because we have to just admit we need to transform the system. It's not enough to just respond to it. It's not enough to just make quick solutions to it. We need young people in masses. If you really want to transform public institutions, it's not enough to have a young minister or a young advisor or young ad hoc things that depend on political will. You have to institutionalize, and that's why I'm emphasizing on institutionalization of co-leadership. Youth have to be in every layer of decision making. That's how we're going to transform the whole of system. And I want to also address the gender question which you asked first, and I didn't address it. Young women is like a double crime. You're young and you're female, and there is no policy for young women. Right now, there are policies for women and quotas for women, and there are frameworks for women. And then there are policies for youth, there are quotas for youth, there are policies that we're pushing for youth, but there is nothing for young women. When you go to the youth space, the young women feel excluded. When you go to the women's space, the young women feel excluded because of the generational divide. where is young women policies? Where are they in the decision making? How are we making sure that they also have a say and contribution? Girls and young women also need to have their own specific framework for us to really move forward in a more youthful leadership and a more gender equality leadership.
It's always so awesome to listen to you, Aya, because I think, honestly, it's, yes, there's the reality. There's where we are, and there's where we are heading. There's where we are going to. And I think we all recognize the fact that it will take some work. And I do believe, as in the previous panel, it takes decision, it takes adaptive leadership to begin to think about how do you design a process that brings in the market, which is the private sector, and the government, to ensure that the people who are currently excluded by virtue of their location in the rural areas or their lack of access to the internet, who are not online, how do we get them on board? And indeed, this is going to start another kind of conversation, but I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to come back to Honorable Minister. Okay, now we've talked about this, and it was asked in the first panel. Aidan had said we cannot allow a crisis like this go to waste. We should make the most of it, right? And Aya had talked about the institutionalization of co-leadership, right? Now, let's think about inclusion and service delivery. Let's think about all of the lessons we have learned from this crisis. We are still in it. We're not out yet, right? In terms of the policy areas, what do you think should be the priorities right now? Not just for Morocco, but what we think are the African continent. What should we be prioritizing to ensure that inclusion is real, and this large cohort of people who are not currently, who don't have the space, particularly digitally, how do we get them to to really deliver on what we are supposed to deliver? What are the policy priorities in this case, or that the government should prioritize? I'd like to get your thoughts again for all of us.
Okay, so thank you for this question. So I know the statistics for Africa. In Morocco, we're a little bit more, I would say, lucky, because 84% of the population already uses the internet. Households that have a smartphone are more than 90%. So the internet penetration, and so the mobile phone penetration is 99%. So we're ahead in terms of access to the internet. However, I do not believe this is sufficient. I think, so this is important, but not sufficient. So I think the next step is working on the human factors. So people are still afraid of digital services. So when I go and say, oh, one of my missions as a minister is to make sure we deliver more public services to citizens. That a lot of their paperwork they can do online, and I promise that this can help them because they don't need to travel all the way to the capital. They don't need to wait in lines. So I tell them, people are scared because they're like, wait, I don't know how to use digital services. I have a phone, but I don't know how to use it. I'm not sure this is going to work. Yeah, they're using, I don't know, all kinds of social media, but whenever they have to fill in a form, they panic. So I think a big policy is, again, to involve, again, all actors. So I believe that everything we do has to involve all actors. And every time we develop a new public service, we have to involve citizens in the entire design. Everything we develop has to be citizen-centric and has to make their lives easier, and we have to involve them, and we have to make, so people have phones, they know how to use a little things, but they cannot go very far. So we need to kind of educate them on the use of smartphones. They have to be, I don't know, more comfortable when using a phone or a computer and doing a little bit more complex stuff. We need to explain, people are scared of digital things. It's unbelievable. So we have to explain to them that digital is there to help them. It's not there to kind of make their life even more complicated. So we're thinking about launching this massive awareness campaign so that people believe that digital can help them, that they can do it. We have to work on all the public services we deliver to make them more user-friendly and more citizen-centric, so that they actually are making their lives easier. Everybody needs to be kind of more, again, a lot of human resources. And when I say human resources, they're within the administration, but also citizens. Another idea we're having, and it's still a little bit an idea right now, we're working on it, is, as you say, there are a lot of youth people who are already using digital services and they know how to use them. And we would love if these youth people can be a force to kind of help other people who are not comfortable with digital tools, to kind of go and teach them and help them. They can be a wonderful force. They can help their neighbors, their parents, their families, other people who are in other cities, and they can make money out of it. I mean, if they can make money out of it, that would be great, because it can give them income, but they can also help in this whole digital transformation. So right now in Morocco, the internet is kind of, I wouldn't say we're perfect, but there is the internet, there are the phones, but we need to go to the next level and make it an economic force, get value out of it. I mean, the infrastructure is kind of there, it's not perfect, but it's kind of there. Now we need to make use out of it and go to the next level, have next startups, digital tools are user-friendly and help the citizens. And that goes through kind of having everybody around and everybody working and educating people and having awareness people and awareness campaigns. And again, this idea that every administration or private company or any institution wants to make a new digital tool, they have to be aware that they have to involve citizens and users at every step of the design and make it more user-friendly and think about how they're going to use it, etc.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Thank you, Aya Shebi. This is the session that we thought we should make things get real. And again, I think we've seen that it has gotten as real as can be. Aya's voice around not just about showing the case studies on the continent and showing examples of how young people can you can be intentional in getting young people involved in the governance space and also getting the best of their capacity. We've also seen the great example in Morocco of how they've been able to use digital tools to really get to improve inclusion, particularly in response to COVID, which we're still in. And again, it's amazing to hear that Morocco indeed has reached 62% of its population with vaccination because of the massive deployment of resources, as well as all the things that we, that the Honorable Minister has talked about. And also finally, basically she has highlighted the need for us to think about citizen-centric design in terms of tools, in terms of access, in terms of utilization of digital services. And I think those are key policies that we should begin to think about pan-African, not just on the basis of where we are right now. So 1 minute to wrap up. I would just ask everybody, Aya and Honorable Minister, for 1 minute, one wrap up. If there is one message you want anybody who is on this platform today to leave here with, they could remember everything, but something you don't want them to forget, what would that be? I will start with Aya and then I'll end with Dr. Mezo.
Actually, is what you said, and I raised my hand because I think we do have amazing examples on the continent, like Morocco, like Kenya, like other countries who have been doing the work, but we need to think Pan-African. When we stand at the global stage, we have to be united, and African countries need to help each other. If one country has more access to internet, they need to help the other country. If one country has more education, they need to help the other country. At the end of the day, if we want to reach the SDGs, we go to the United Nations as the African bloc. We don't go as our little tiny countries. And as young people as well, we are borderless. We want to think of ourselves as African. And so when we sit together and we want to say, oh, this country did and this country did, we want to say, as African youth, this is what we've been able to achieve. And this is where our continent deserves to be. So I really encourage all governments here, all networks, or civil society to think Pan-African, starting, of course, from the community and showing all these case studies. But at the end of the day, we want to stand as a global player.
Thank you so much, Aya. Dr. Mezo, please. Honorable Minister.
So my message is that I agree with Aya that we should work together as African countries and benefit from each other's strengths. And digital tools can be a tool tool and should be a tool for inclusion, for helping vulnerable populations. And digital tools are not only about digital tools, they are also about human resources, about awareness, and young people can play a critical role there because they're on digital tools. They can help transform society and help society making full use of it. They can be a very important force there.
Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, today, this session has been about inclusion, about taking the next frontier, about how we bring everybody on board in an open, in an inclusive system that brings that give us the best result as a people. And I want to really stand on the ground that Aya has put about. I want to be seen as an African, right? And when you go outside these shows, they talk about how is from Africa, as if Africa is one country. But here, the reality is that we are really not. But the more young people we have that are in government, and I do want to really acknowledge Dr. Mezo in terms of one, even if you're not very young, you look very young. It would be great to see many more, ministers like these who are in touch with the reality of our generation. Again, I have some gray beards, but I'm sure I'm still in this generation. But the most important thing here is that we need to move as a block. We need to learn from each other. We need to open the space for citizens. And ultimately, we need to be speaking with one voice. And thank you so much all for participating. And I look forward to the next fantastic summit and the next other opportunity we can talk again. Thank you, OGP, and thank you for this, my guest.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.